Moving on to the selection of literary text for English language classrooms, we must realize that every text may not be useful for the teaching of language. Therefore, there must be some criteria or principles based on which we can decide that which text would be more useful for the teaching of language. As I've just said, that a careful selection is definitely needed in this regard. For example, if we introduce a text which is overloaded with difficult vocabulary or cultural items that might create problems for the learners in terms of their understanding and comprehension, and not only of linguistic items but also of various cultural components. So in this way, this might be counterproductive. In this regard, we can say that selecting a literary text which is easy to read and include culturally relevant material might be more useful for the learning of our students. However, we must be cautious also about the fact that sometimes oversimplified or a very easy text may not be challenging for the students. Thus, they would not generate any interest among students and would not make them learn anything, in other words. Therefore, we should focus on selecting those texts which would challenge our student a bit, and they would take interest in meeting that challenge, and in the process they would learn more about the language. Again, some texts which pose some literary or cultural complexity may be counterproductive, because students might face some understanding problem and they might sometimes get a cultural shock. For example, certain materials may not be acceptable in various or in different cultures. For example, some elements of a Western way of life may not be acceptable in a typical Muslim society. So what should be done? So those elements those literary texts which focus more on those Western elements may be avoided or may be abridged for the readers in our communities, so that we may not face a comprehension problem. Similarly, we can give the example that the novel Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte should be understood in a typical Victorian society in Great Britain, and the readers or the learners in our settings or in South Asian settings may find a difficulty in understanding the various linguistic and cultural elements discussed in that novel. Therefore, a careless employment of Wuthering Heights in any second language classroom in South Asian context may be, again, counterproductive. So if you decide to introduce such novels in your classrooms, there should be graded carefully, and they should be introduced to the students with an element of proper orientation. Any text you choose for your classroom should have some potential interest to the learners, so they can associate with that text, and it is assumed that in such cases learning would be greater. The selected text should allow students to develop critical appreciation of the craft as well as the aesthetics of language. So there should be some genuine interest or genuine understanding and liking for the text. And then the range of text should ideally include traditional and contemporary texts, the text written in classical times and the text written these days. This would actually would reduce the fear of boredom, as well as would introduce to the learners to various uses of the language in various times. Then the text should also include various genres of the literature. For example, text should be taken from poetry, prose, and other aspects of literature as well. The text should be appropriate to the development and the age of learners, and this would decide about their level of learning as well. So this is a very commonsensical point, that we cannot introduce oversensitive or complicated text to the younger students. Therefore, a care must be taken about this element. The selected text should also include a balance of new and established works, and which is very important to introduce students to the various tastes of the language. Then they should also contain print and non-print text, which are easily available. This is very important these days, because we have various sources for non-print text, and these are usually available on internet or other video resources. And this could be also useful for the motivational aspects of learners as well. So teachers should look at a wide range of text when they select literary text for their language classrooms.